It happened in an instant. I was standing there at my mom's 53rd birthday party when my brother slammed the soup tureen down on the table, and before I knew it, the hot beef broth exploded across my face, drenching me from head to toe. The liquid was scalding. I could feel it seeping through my hair, running down my neck, soaking into my clothes. But you know what? The physical pain. The physical pain was nothing compared to what came next. I stood there in shock, feeling the heat of the broth on my skin. But it wasn't just the pain of the soup, it was the sting of betrayal. My family, the people I trusted most, the people who were supposed to have my back no matter what, had just torn everything apart. And they did it with smiles on their faces. They did it while everyone watched. They did it like I was nothing, like I meant absolutely nothing to them. The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. Everyone was staring at me, aunts, uncles, cousins, my mother's friends, all of them just staring. Some had their hands over their mouths in shock. Others looked away, like they couldn't bear to watch. But no one moved. No one came to help me. No one said a single word in my defense. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, just when I thought maybe this was some horrible accident, some terrible mistake, my brother looked me dead in the eye and said, "You have 15 minutes to get out of this family." 15 minutes. Like I was trash being thrown out on collection day. Like 28 years of being his sister meant absolutely nothing. Like every birthday, every Christmas, every family dinner, every moment we'd shared growing up, all of it could be erased in 15 minutes. If this is already hitting close to home, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, this story is far from over, and you won't want to miss the shocking twist that's coming. I'm Julia. I'm 28 years old. And the moment I got drenched in that soup was the beginning of something I couldn't have predicted. The soup wasn't just a meal. It was a symbol of everything I'd worked for, and everything I was about to lose. Everything I thought was solid in my life turned out to be built on sand. And that soup? That was the wave that washed it all away. Have you ever felt completely alone in a room full of people? Like the people who are supposed to love you can't even see you? Like you're screaming but no one can hear you? Well, that was my reality. That was my life in that moment. I was standing there, dripping with soup, humiliated beyond words, and not a single person in that room stood up for me. Not one. My sister Sarah was sitting right there at the table. She looked at me with this cold expression. No sympathy, no shock, just coldness, like she'd been expecting this, like she'd been waiting for it. My mother, the woman who gave birth to me, who raised me, who told me she loved me every single day of my childhood, she just sat there at the head of the table, her face completely blank, neutral, like she was watching a stranger get humiliated, not her own daughter. And my brother Michael. God, Michael. He stood there with his arms crossed, looking so proud of himself. So satisfied, like he'd finally done something he'd been wanting to do for years. The hatred in his eyes was so pure, so absolute, that it actually took my breath away. "Did you hear me?" he said, his voice dripping with contempt. 15 minutes. That's all you get. Then I want you out of this house, and I want you out of our lives. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. What could I possibly say? How do you respond when your entire world crumbles in seconds? How do you find words when you can't even breathe? Someone started crying. I thought maybe it was my mother. Maybe she finally felt something. But no, it was my Aunt Karen, and she wasn't crying for me. She was crying because the party was ruined. Because the atmosphere was destroyed. Not because her niece was being destroyed right in front of her eyes. It wasn't just about a spilled soup. God, I wish it was just about the soup. I wish it was just a moment of anger, a flash of temper that would blow over. But it wasn't. It was about what came after. It was about the weeks and months of tension that had been building. It was about the lies, the manipulation, the plotting that had been happening behind my back while I smiled and laughed, and thought I was part of a loving family. The people I thought I could rely on, my family, turned on me in an instant. One minute I was celebrating my mother's birthday, bringing the homemade soup I'd spent all morning preparing, and the next, I was being expelled like a disease, like something contaminated that needed to be removed before it infected everyone else. I had to figure out how to survive this betrayal, and I wasn't going to let them have the last word. As I stood there, soup dripping from my hair onto the hardwood floor, something inside me shifted. The shock started to wear off, and underneath it was anger, pure, burning anger, and pain. So much pain that I thought my chest would explode from it. Why? I finally managed to whisper. My voice was shaking, cracking. Why are you doing this? Michael laughed. He actually laughed. Why? You really have to ask why? After everything you've done? Everything I've done? I repeated, my voice getting louder. What have I done? What have I possibly done to deserve this? You know exactly what you did, Sarah chimed in, her voice sharp and accusing. Don't play innocent with us, Julia. We know the truth now. The truth. They kept talking about the truth, but I had no idea what they were talking about. I looked around the room desperately, searching for one friendly face, one person who might explain what was happening, but there was nothing. Just cold stares and turned backs. The fallout from that moment wasn't just emotional. My whole life, my career, my family, everything I knew, felt like it was slipping away, and there was no one to turn to. I worked at my brother's company. My apartment was in a building my family owned. My car was registered under my father's name. He'd passed away 3 years earlier, and we'd never changed it. My health insurance was through the family business. My entire existence was woven into this family tapestry, and now they were ripping me out thread by thread. I want my key back, Michael said, holding out his hand. The key to the office. Right now. Michael, please, I begged, and I hated how pathetic I sounded. Just tell me what this is about. Let me explain. Explain? He cut me off. Explain how you went behind our backs? Explain how you manipulated Dad before he died? Explain how you thought you could steal everything from under our noses and we wouldn't find out? Steal? Manipulate? What was he talking about? My father and I had been close, yes. We'd spent time together during his final months. I'd been the one sitting by his bedside when he could barely speak. I'd been the one holding his hand when he took his last breath. But I hadn't manipulated him. I hadn't stolen anything. You're confused, I said desperately. You're mixing up what actually happened with what? Sarah stood up now, her face red with anger. With reality? We know about the will, Julia. We know what you did. The will. My father's will. That's what this was about. I didn't do anything with the will, I said firmly, even though my hands were shaking. I don't know what you think happened, but 12 minutes, Michael interrupted, looking at his watch. You're wasting your time. The key, now. I fumbled in my purse with trembling hands, pulled out my key ring, and removed the office key. The metal felt so small in my palm, but it represented everything. My job, my identity, my purpose. I'd worked at that company for 6 years. I'd helped build it from a small startup to a thriving business. And now it was being taken away like it meant nothing. I placed the key in Michael's outstretched hand. He closed his fist around it without even looking at me. The apartment key too, Sarah added. Mom's building. You're not staying there anymore. Of course they'd thought of everything. They'd planned this. This wasn't a spontaneous outburst. This was calculated, orchestrated. They'd been waiting for this moment, probably for weeks. I removed another key and held it out. Sarah snatched it from my hand like I was diseased. What am I supposed to do? I asked, my voice breaking. Where am I supposed to go? Not our problem, Michael said coldly. You should have thought about that before you decided to betray this family. Betray. That word kept coming up, but I hadn't betrayed anyone. I hadn't done anything wrong, and yet here I was, being cast out like a criminal. But while they thought they had destroyed me, what they didn't know was that I had something in my back pocket, something I was about to use to make sure they never crossed me again. See, they were right about one thing: there was a will. My father's will. But they were completely wrong about what was in it. I hadn't stolen anything. I hadn't manipulated anyone. My father had made his choices clearly and deliberately, with a sound mind and a lawyer present. And what was in that will? What was really in that will? They had no idea. They thought they knew. They thought someone had told them the truth. But they were about to find out they'd been played. Fine, I said quietly, straightening my back despite the soup still dripping from my clothes. I'll leave. But you're going to regret this, all of you. Michael snorted. Is that a threat? No, I said, looking him straight in the eye. It's a promise. I walked out of that house with soup in my hair and rage in my heart. I had 8 minutes left of my 15, but I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of watching me scramble. I walked slowly, deliberately, with my head held high. I could feel their eyes on my back, but I didn't turn around. I didn't give them the pleasure. When I got to my car, thank God I'd driven myself, I sat in the driver's seat and just shook. The adrenaline was wearing off and the reality was setting in. I was homeless. I was jobless. I was familyless. Everything I'd built my life on had been destroyed in 15 minutes. But I wasn't powerless. And they were about to learn that. The story wasn't about the soup. It was about taking control, facing the consequences of betrayal, and showing them who was really in charge. See, my father had changed his will 6 months before he died. I knew because I was there when he did it, not because I asked him to, not because I manipulated him, but because he asked me to witness it. He'd told me what he was doing, and he'd told me why. "They've gotten greedy," he'd said to me, his voice weak, but his eyes clear. "Your brother and sister, they think I don't notice, but I do. They're already spending money they don't have, making plans for assets they don't own yet. They've forgotten what family means. They've forgotten kindness and loyalty and love. But you, Julia, you've stayed true. You've been here, not because you want something, but because you care." I'd cried that day. I'd told him he didn't need to change anything, that I didn't want his money, that I just wanted him to get better. But he'd smiled and patted my hand. "I know you don't want it," he'd said. "That's exactly why you should have it." The new will left controlling interest in the family company to me, 51%. The building where Sarah lived, where I had been living too, was in my name. The trust fund that Michael had been counting on, that was mine to manage, with very specific instructions on how it could be distributed. My father had left them comfortable, yes, but he'd left me in control. And they had no idea. They thought they'd seen the old will. Someone, probably my Uncle Robert, who'd always been jealous of my dad's success, had probably shown them a copy of the original will and told them I'd manipulated my father into changing it. But they hadn't seen the actual legal document. They hadn't talked to the lawyer. They just believed whatever poison had been poured in their ears. I drove to a hotel that night, checked in under my own name, and immediately called my father's lawyer, Martin Henderson. It was late, but this was an emergency. "Julia?" he answered, sounding concerned. "Is everything all right?" "No," I said. And then I told him everything. The party, the soup, the expulsion, the accusations. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "They don't know, do they?" Martin finally said. "They don't know about the actual will." "No," I confirmed. "They think they know, but they don't." "The reading is scheduled for next week," Martin said carefully. "Unless you want to move it up?" "No," I said slowly, a plan forming in my mind. "Let's keep it as scheduled. Let them think they've won. Let them think they've gotten rid of me and they're about to inherit everything. And then we'll show them the truth." The next few days were hell. I stayed in that hotel room, barely eating, barely sleeping. My phone rang constantly, friends who'd heard about what happened. Distant relatives calling to say they couldn't believe I'd betrayed the family. Even some of my coworkers texting to say they were sorry, but they couldn't be associated with me anymore. Michael had obviously told everyone his version of the story. That I'd manipulated our dying father. That I'd stolen from the family. That I was a conniving, greedy monster who deserved everything I got. And people believed him, because why wouldn't they? He was charismatic, successful, trusted, and I was just Julia. Quiet Julia. Sweet Julia. Julia who never made waves. Well, quiet Julia was done. Sweet Julia had left the building, and they were about to meet the real me. Sarah sent me one text during those days. "Mom cried all night. I hope you're happy with what you've done to this family." I almost threw my phone across the room. What I'd done. What I'd done. I hadn't done anything except love them, support them, be there for them. And this was how they repaid me? I didn't respond. Let her think I was consumed with guilt. Let them all think they'd broken me. The day of the will reading arrived. It was held at Martin's office, a sleek building downtown with marble floors and mahogany furniture, very prestigious, very appropriate for a man like my father, who'd built his fortune from nothing and always maintained his dignity. I arrived exactly on time, wearing a black dress and heels, professional, composed. My hair was pulled back in a neat bun, no trace of soup anywhere. I looked like I belonged there, even though inside I was a mess of nerves and anger and pain. Michael was already there, sitting in one of the leather chairs with his legs crossed, looking relaxed and confident. Sarah sat next to him, whispering something in his ear. They both looked up when I walked in, and the hatred on their faces was palpable. "What are you doing here?" Michael demanded. I was invited, I said calmly, taking a seat across from them. Just like you. You've got some nerve showing your face, Sarah hissed. After what you did. After what I did? I interrupted, and my voice was cold as ice. Funny. I'm still waiting for someone to tell me what exactly I did. Besides exist, apparently. Martin walked in before they could respond, carrying a thick manila folder. He nodded at each of us professionally. Thank you all for coming, he said, sitting down behind his desk. I know this is a difficult time, and I'll try to make this as brief as possible. We're here for the reading of Mr. Way, David Morrison's last will and testament. My mother entered the room then, looking frail and older than her 53 years. She wouldn't look at me, just took her seat next to Sarah, and folded her hands in her lap. Before we begin, Martin continued, I want to be clear that this is the final, legal will of David Morrison, updated 6 months before his passing. Any previous versions of this document are null and void. I saw Michael shift in his seat. Sarah's eyes narrowed. Wait, Michael said. Updated? What do you mean updated? Your father revised his will in January of last year, Martin explained. I have the signed and witnessed document right here. That's impossible, Sarah said quickly. Dad was too sick in January. He couldn't have. He was of sound mind, Martin interrupted firmly. I can assure you, the will is legally binding and uncontestable. Shall I continue? The room went silent. I could feel the tension building, could see the confusion starting to creep into their expressions. They were beginning to realize that something wasn't right, that their information was wrong. Martin opened the folder and began to read. The next few hours were a blur, but what I did next was something none of them saw coming. As Martin read through the will, I watched my family's faces change from confusion to shock to absolute horror. I revealed everything, the inheritance, the will, the betrayal, and I made sure they knew that everything they thought was theirs wasn't anymore. To my son Michael, Martin read, I leave the sum of $500,000, with the condition that it be held in trust and released in quarterly installments over a period of 10 years, managed by the trustee designated in this will. Michael's face went white. 500,000 sounded like a lot, but spread over 10 years? That was nothing compared to what he'd been expecting. And managed by someone else? He couldn't touch it freely? To my daughter Sarah, Martin continued, I leave the property at 422 Maple Street, along with the sum of $300,000, also, to be held in trust, and released over a period of 5 years. Sarah gasped. The property at 422 Maple Street was a small cottage in the suburbs. Nice, but nothing compared to the building in downtown that she thought she'd be getting. And 300,000? That wouldn't even cover her shopping habit for 5 years, let alone support her lifestyle. To my wife Elizabeth, Martin read, I leave the family home and all its contents, along with a lifetime annuity of $10,000 per month, to ensure her comfort for the remainder of her life. My mother nodded slightly. At least she'd been provided for. That was decent, if not generous. Then Martin looked directly at me, and to my daughter Julia, he read, and I could hear the tension in the room become almost unbearable. I leave the majority of my estate. This includes controlling interest 51% of Morrison Industries, the commercial building at 1250 Broadway, the vacation properties in Aspen and the Hamptons, the investment portfolio managed by Stearns & Associates, and the remainder of my liquid assets, estimated at approximately $12 million. The room went silent. Completely, utterly silent. Then all hell broke loose. What? Michael roared, jumping to his feet. That's impossible. That's fraud. She manipulated him. That's not, Sarah was sputtering, her face bright red. Mom, tell them this is wrong. Tell them. My mother just sat there, staring at me with wide eyes. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. Additionally, Martin continued, raising his voice to be heard over their protests, David Morrison included a letter of explanation, which I am instructed to read at this time. I don't want to hear it, Michael shouted. This is bullshit. We're contesting this. We're going to court. You're welcome to try, Martin said calmly, but I assure you, this will is ironclad. Now, if you'll let me finish. He cleared his throat and began to read my father's letter. To my children Michael and Sarah, Martin read in my father's words. I know this distribution may come as a surprise to you, I want you to understand that this decision was not made lightly, nor was it made due to any manipulation or undue influence. I made this choice with a clear mind and a heavy heart. Over the past few years, I have watched you both change. I have watched you become focused on money and status, rather than family and character. I have heard you discuss what you'll do with your inheritance before I'm even gone. I have seen you treat your sister with dismissiveness and sometimes cruelty, assuming she would always be there, always be less than you. I felt tears starting to burn in my eyes, but I blinked them back. Not now. Not here. Julia is not perfect, the letter continued, but she has remained kind. She has remained humble. When I was sick, she came to visit not because she wanted something, but because she cared. She held my hand, she read to me, she made me laugh, even when I was in pain. She reminded me what really matters in life. I am leaving her the majority of my estate, because I trust her to do good with it. I trust her to take care of the family business that I built from nothing. I trust her to be fair and just, even to those who may not deserve it. And I hope that this decision might teach you all something about what truly has value in this world. If you're angry, I understand. But direct that anger at yourselves, not at your sister. Look in the mirror and ask yourselves why I made this choice. And maybe, just maybe, use this as an opportunity to become better people. Martin folded the letter and looked up. That concludes the reading of the will. Julia, you'll need to sign some documents to take official ownership of the properties and business interests. The rest of you, your inheritances will be distributed according to the terms outlined. If you have any legal questions, I'm happy to discuss them, but I must reiterate that this will is legally sound and cannot be contested. The room went silent again. They realized I wasn't just some target to be tossed around. I had everything I needed to show them the consequences of their actions. Michael was staring at me with pure hatred. Sarah was crying, but they weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of rage and frustration. My mother still hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. How could you? Sarah finally whispered. How could you do this to us? I didn't do anything, I said, my voice steady despite the emotion churning inside me. Dad did this. He made this choice. He saw who you really were, and this was his response. You poisoned him against us, Michael shouted, pointing his finger at me accusingly. You spent all that time with him when he was dying, filling his head with lies about us. I never said a word against either of you, I replied firmly. Not one word. Every conclusion Dad came to, he came to, on his own. By watching you, by listening to you, by seeing how you treated people. Bullshit. Michael slammed his hand on the desk. This is bullshit, and everyone knows it. We're going to fight this. We're going to prove you manipulated him. Go ahead and try, I said, standing up. I was done sitting there, done being the victim. Spend whatever's left of your $500,000 on lawyers. See where it gets you. Dad's lawyer is one of the best in the state, and this will is completely legal. You'll lose, and you'll waste what little you were given. I turned to Martin. What do I need to sign? As Martin laid out the documents in front of me, I could hear my family behind me. Sarah's crying had turned to sobs. Michael was pacing, muttering under his breath. My mother finally spoke. Julia, she said quietly, and her voice sounded old and tired. Can we talk, please? I looked at her over my shoulder. I had 15 minutes to leave your family, remember? Why should I give you more time than that? Please, she said again. I'm your mother. Are you? I asked, and I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. Because a mother would have defended her daughter. A mother would have stopped Michael from humiliating me. A mother would have asked questions before choosing sides. But you just sat there. You watched him dump soup on my head and throw me out, and you did nothing. I didn't know, she started. You didn't want to know, I interrupted. There's a difference. I turned back to the documents and signed each one methodically. My hand was shaking slightly, but I got through them all. Each signature felt like taking back a piece of myself. Each signature was an act of reclamation. When I finished, Martin gathered the documents and smiled at me slightly. Congratulations, Miss Morrison. You're now the majority owner of Morrison Industries. Thank you, I said quietly. This isn't over, Michael said from behind me, his voice low and threatening. You think you've won, but this isn't over. We're family. You can't just... We're not family, I said, turning to face him fully. You made that clear when you gave me 15 minutes to get out. Family doesn't treat each other the way you treated me. Family doesn't believe lies without asking questions. Family doesn't choose money over people. So that's it? Sarah asked through her tears. You're just going to take everything and leave us with nothing? You're not getting nothing, I pointed out. You're getting more than most people will ever have in their lifetimes. You're just not getting everything you thought you were entitled to. There's a difference. We built that company too, Michael insisted. I've worked there for 8 years. And you'll continue to work there, I said calmly. Unless you choose to quit. But let me make something very clear. Things are going to change. The culture of entitlement, the nepotism, the way you've been running things, all of that ends now. You'll be treated like any other employee. You'll have to actually earn your place. You can't. I can, I interrupted. I own 51%. I can do whatever I want. And right now, what I want is to honor Dad's legacy by running the company the right way, the way he would have wanted it run. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. Where are you going? My mother called after me. To start my new life, I said without turning around. The one where I'm not constantly being belittled and disrespected by people who are supposed to love me. The one where I'm in control of my own destiny. Julia, wait, Sarah started. But I was done waiting. I walked out of that office and didn't look back. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. I moved into the penthouse apartment at the Broadway building, my building now that had been sitting empty because my father had used it as his office. It was beautiful, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, high ceilings, and enough space that I could breathe. I hired my own lawyer to help me navigate the complexities of suddenly owning a multi-million-dollar company. I met with the board of directors, most of whom had known and respected my father. I discovered that Michael had been making some questionable decisions, using company funds for personal expenses, giving contracts to his friends, regardless of whether they were qualified. I put a stop to all of it. I also discovered that Sarah had been living rent-free in one of the family properties for the past 3 years, despite having told everyone she was paying market rate. She'd been pocketing the difference money that should have gone back into the family business. I didn't call her out publicly, but I did send her a notice that she would need to start paying actual rent or vacate the property within 60 days. Michael tried to undermine me at every turn. He spread rumors among the employees that I was incompetent, that I'd stolen the company, that things would fall apart under my leadership. But I had my father's documentation of everything, including some emails where Michael had discussed selling off parts of the company the moment he inherited it. I called a company-wide meeting and laid out my vision. I talked about my father's values, his commitment to quality and integrity, his belief in treating employees fairly. I implemented new policies, transparent accounting, merit-based promotions, better benefits for lower-level employees, and a zero-tolerance policy for nepotism and corruption. The employees loved it. The ones who had been working there for years, who had actually cared about the company, rather than just seeing it as a cash cow, they were thrilled. For the first time in years, they felt heard and valued. Michael resigned 3 weeks later. He sent me a scathing email about how I'd destroyed the family, and he wanted nothing more to do with me or the company. I accepted his resignation effective immediately and hired someone actually qualified to fill his position. Sarah called me one night, drunk and crying. "You've ruined everything," she sobbed into the phone. "Mom won't talk to me. Michael won't talk to me. Everyone blames me because I didn't stop this. But I didn't know. I didn't know Dad had changed the will." "I didn't know either," I told her quietly. "Not until he told me what he was doing, and why. And you know what? I tried to talk him out of it. I told him, you guys deserved equal shares. But he was adamant. He'd made his decision." "But why?" she cried. "Why did he hate us so much?" "He didn't hate you," I said, and I felt a pang of sympathy despite everything. "He loved you. That's why this hurt him so much. He loved you, and he was disappointed by who you'd become. There's a difference." She hung up on me. In the end, my brother's company crumbled. Well, not the company that was thriving under my leadership, but Michael's reputation crumbled. Word got out about the mismanagement, the embezzlement, the questionable practices. He tried to start his own business, but no one wanted to work with him. No one trusted him. My sister's dreams faded. She'd always wanted to be a socialite, to host parties, and be featured in magazines, and live a life of luxury. But without the family money backing her, without the prestige of the Morrison name opening doors, she was just another person struggling to make ends meet. And I was left standing with everything my family had tried to take from me, even though they'd never actually had it in the first place. The soup wasn't the end. It was the beginning of my new life. One where I would never be disrespected again. One where I had the power to create change, to honor my father's legacy, to prove that kindness and integrity aren't weaknesses. But it came at a cost. I lost my family. My mother sends me a card on my birthday, but we don't talk. We don't have dinners or celebrate holidays together. Sarah occasionally texts me, usually when she needs money, which I don't give her. Michael hasn't spoken to me since his resignation. Some nights I sit in my beautiful penthouse, looking out over the city lights, and I feel the weight of the loneliness. I have money now, I have power, I have respect, but I don't have family. I don't have my mother's laugh, or my sister's gossip, or my brother's terrible jokes. Was it worth it? I don't know. Some days I think yes, they showed me who they really were, and I'm better off without that toxicity in my life. Other days I think about birthdays and holidays, about nieces and nephews I'll probably never meet, about family traditions that died with my father. This story wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about reclaiming my power, my life, and my future. It was about standing up for myself when no one else would. It was about honoring my father's wishes, even when they tore my family apart. It was about learning that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. And it was about discovering that I was stronger than I ever thought I could be. Do I regret how things turned out? No. I didn't choose this path, they did, when they decided to believe lies instead of asking me for the truth. They did when Michael dumped that soup on my head. They did when they gave me 15 minutes to leave. But do I mourn what we could have been? Do I grieve for the family we should have had, the relationships we could have maintained if they'd just chosen differently? Every single day. That's the real pain. Not the soup, not the humiliation, not even the betrayal. It's the loss, the permanent, irreversible loss of something I can never get back. My father saw this coming. That's why he made the choices he did. He knew that after he was gone, his children would fight over money. He knew that greed would destroy whatever bonds we had left. So he tried to protect me, to give me the tools I'd need to survive what was coming. But I don't think even he realized how complete the destruction would be. Sometimes I wonder what he would think if he could see us now. Would he be proud of how I've run the company? Would he be sad about how fractured the family has become? Would he regret his decision? Or would he stand by it? I like to think he'd be proud. I like to think he'd see that I've honored his legacy, treated his employees well, grown the business responsibly. I like to think he'd understand that the fracture wasn't my fault, that I tried, that I was willing to forgive, that I gave them chances even after everything. But they chose anger over understanding. They chose pride over reconciliation. They chose to see me as an enemy, rather than as their sister. And I've had to learn to live with that, because running a company while dealing with family sabotage, that's its own adventure. And Michael's business ventures keep intersecting with mine, in ways that are complicated. If you have ever lost family over money, if you have ever been blamed for something you didn't do, if you have ever had to choose between what's right and what's easy, let me know where you're watching from, and share your own experiences with betrayal in the comments below. I want to hear your stories. I will read every comment. I will respond to as many as I can. Because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to figure out how to navigate this messy, complicated thing called family. And sometimes, the family we choose, the friends who stand by us, the colleagues who respect us, the community we build, are what seems matter more at the end.